So in this video, I'm going to show you 5 next level cinematic gimbal moves that you can also use on a camera that's handheld, or even a camera like a GoPro that's got image stabilization that's so good it might as well be on a gimbal. I'm Haydn Rushworth. I'm a filmmaker, a screenwriter and a director, and in this video I'm going to show you some gimbal moves that you normally don't see on YouTube. Now, YouTube has lots of terrific advice for gimbal users, and you'll often see a title that says cinematic gimbal moves, and they kind of are, but they're mostly the same ones. It's like following somebody from behind, you know, tracking them from behind the back of their head, or maybe following their feet and then moving upwards to the back of their head from behind as they walk along, or just walking sideways so that you're walking side and you're looking at the side of somebody's head as you're walking along, or the side of somebody's body. Or maybe you're standing in front of somebody and you're walking backwards while that person's walking towards you. And I mean, these are great, these are important, but I wanted to show you some things that are used in Hollywood movies and in high-end TV productions. And again, they can be used on cameras. They don't have to be on a gimbal, but a gimbal makes it easy. Jason Bourne, all those movies, I don't think they used a gimbal once in those movies. You know, there comes a point where you kind of think, I wouldn't be upset if you used a gimbal once in a while. But before we get into this, I want to talk about what cinematic really means, at least to me. You see, as a screenwriter and as a filmmaker, I work in stories, and most of what I see on YouTube when filmmakers talk about a cinematic, kind of cinematic B-roll or a cinematic sequence, it kind of has a look about it, it does, but there's one really, really important thing missing. It's not a story. Usually it's just a sequence. A sequence is just a sequence of events, uninterrupted, unopposed, with no objections and no problems. A story is different. A story features a protagonist who has problems to overcome, and they first attempt a solution that doesn't work, and then after getting discouraged and having a new wave of hope, they attempt a second wave at attacking the problem, and they conquer the problem next time around and learn a lesson from it. In a nutshell, I've just given you the 3-act story structure. But at the very least, you are revealing bits of information as you go along. In cinema, everything serves the story. That means if you're going to do anything with sound, with the camera movement, everything that you do, it has to be serving the story and not just there for decoration. A cinematic gimbal move is typically one where you are where the movement of the camera is unfolding the next element in the story. Usually you're revealing some little piece of information next, and another piece of information, and another piece of information. And even if it's just in tiny little ways, a cinematic gimbal move or a cinematic camera move, to me, helps to tell that story. The viewer, by the end of that sequence, knows more than they did at the beginning. And you can either do that by cutting from one shot to another. You can go from a wide establishing shot to then another close-up shot, one bit of information, and then you can go to another shot and you can cut. That is absolutely legitimately one way of doing it. Sometimes it's more dynamic to do the same thing but with a single shot, and that's where a gimbal move can be really, really handy. Often it's a directorial choice, it's a cinematic choice, but it's an option for you. Now, before I get into this, first some disclaimers, okay? First, we didn't have time for any kind of lighting. This is pandemic time guerrilla filmmaking, and we just found a place that happened to be well lit in the dark, and we thought, well, let's just use it. Secondly, focusing. On a pro film set, you have a dedicated focus puller, and in working in the dark as we did last night, we had the aperture wide open, which means a really shallow depth of field, which means focusing is a pain. It also means that it looks better because you're blurring out bits in the background that you don't really want the audience to focus on. But focusing is a bit all over the place. Focusing was a challenge. Next disclaimer, I didn't have the gimbal set up properly. In fact, I'm struggling with it. I've got a Weebill S, and it's a great gimbal, but the fluidity, I haven't got it nailed yet. So I'd welcome suggestions in the comments below as to how to set this up so that the gimbal isn't just kind of flicking. You'll see it. Next disclaimer, I'm not claiming that I'm good at this. I'm just an observer and I'm giving it a go. It takes practice. These next level gimbal moves they're tricky, I won't lie. They're not easy. It takes skill, it takes practice, it takes experience. If you get good at it, you can create some amazing stuff. But this is not for the faint-hearted, and it's not going to be easy, but it's possible, and it looks great if you practice, practice, practice and get it nailed. I don't get to practice enough with this kind of filmmaking, so anyway, next disclaimer. For those of you who know how to use firearms, this will be embarrassing because we're in Britain and firearms are all but completely illegal here, so we don't know what we're doing with guns. We pick them up, we wave them around. Humor us. It's all about the gimbal moves, it's not about the weapons, okay? Let's get into them. The first one is what is a really simple one. I call it the run push, where you're pushing into it. I've never come across these officially named before, so I've kind of named them myself. Now with this one, both Lauren and I, we started at the finishing point and we focused on her in the finishing point, and then we both ran backwards. And then when I shouted action, we both ran right to each other and stopped at our pre-designated markers on the ground. And from there, I just added a little more movement and started to walk backwards with Lauren. And this is how it looked. The second move, we'll call it the boomerang. And this is something I saw in a Mission Impossible movie. And basically it's very much, it's like kind of going in and back out again, but this one's a little more at an angle. So with this one, I kind of went in towards the spot that we had agreed for Lauren to come into, and then I moved slightly to one side, and as she turned around and decided to run in the other direction, I moved backwards with her. So here in this shot, you see I'm firstly moving into scene, so an establishing shot, then Lauren jumps in. And then she hears the noise, she turns around, she sees the person she's hunting, she turns around, starts going after them. So the next move is what I call an L-shaped move, and this is where Lauren and I both walked towards each other at the same point, but then we diverged off at a right angle down in a different direction, and this is where I chose to kind of go behind her. I could have gone in front of her, but you're basically taking you're going towards somebody, meeting them, changing your angle in some way, and then going in a different direction. The next one is what I call the T-shape move, and this is where you've kind of got, imagine this, you've got this kind of T-shape, you know what a T looks like. So I am running up here, moving forwards here, and I'm revealing a little bit of the scenery that's in front of me, and then Lauren steps into scene, and then Lauren turns and we both start walking back the direction we've just come. But as we get to center point, I back down the T-line, I go backwards, still facing her, whilst Lauren then pulls the gun out and we get to see a new piece of information, the gun. And then I turn around and follow her, and the camera gets to see what she's looking at and where she's going towards. So first I'm backing away from her, then turning around, and then moving in the direction that she's moving in. The final move, I call it the swirly. This is where you're kind of swirling around a character, going upwards or down to kind of reveal new bits of information. In reality, you could also just kind of do the same thing with a gimbal move that goes up. But with Lauren, with this one, we had her walking and stopping in the starting point in the scene. And as I moved around, I moved up to where she was pulling the gun out of her pocket. I could see the gun raising up to her head. Then I moved around, showed her face. So there you are. Those are cinematic gimbal moves that are more about storytelling. If you have any that you get any great examples, please send me some links in the comments below. Anyway, thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, blah 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 blah. I'll see you in the next video.